Good afternoon, everyone. Catherine Cooke, founder of The Engine and leading business advisor, and I'm so happy to have two women in business I work with, Alannah Stewart, partner from Wayland, Auckland, and leading business advisor to The Engine, Christine Rankin, discussing a topic I'm so passionate about, the value of women at the board table in leadership and business. Nice to see you both.
Hello, good afternoon, both of you.
And you.
I was just admiring Alannah's shirt there, Christine, and feeling like I needed to be in the island with maybe a Miss Saigon cocktail, but
very spring-like.
I'm trying to I guess get spring to hurry up and come, because I'm so looking forward to it.
You'll be glad you're not here today. Once again, it's very cold.
Oh, really? Wow. Okay.
Reality kicks in when you get outside the door, that's for sure. Now, before we start this conversation, the topic is about the value of women, not a conversation about favouring women. So I just want to be very clear to anyone who's watching this. It's purely a discussion around the value women bring to the board table in leadership and business, and creating a working environment that allows everyone to thrive and progress. The New Zealand Herald reported on the 18th of July this year that female founders are receiving less than 11% of venture capital from public and private sources, despite typically generating twice as much revenue as male-owned startups. The former a finding that has not existed before today. They said it's a result of research initiated and personally funded by former telecom chief executive of My Food Bag co-founder Teresa Gattung and investor and entrepreneur Jenny Rudd. She wrote, "I'm disappointed but surprised." That was from Teresa Gattung. And she told the Herald that we've certainly come a long way, but there's definitely a gap. Since 1893, when Kate Sheppard led the way in New Zealand's suffrage movement, enabling women to vote, we've certainly come a long way, as I've just said. There's always been a divide in our community around gender, with disparity in earnings between men and women. But let's get some quick thoughts from you first, Christine, on what that 32 billion gender gap result means for professional women.
It is a real shock to me, and it shows that we have to be vigilant in making sure that we are seen for what we are worth. And I guess through all I've been through in my life and the way I've seen women progress, it's an awful position for us still to be in. And it's a real challenge.
Yeah, you're not wrong there. It is a real challenge. And something like you said, it's really surprising that we're still there, we've come a long way, so we've got to celebrate how much we've achieved, but there's still a long way to go. So Alannah, we've known each other, dare I say, over 30 years, because when I write that and I look at us, I go, certainly it hasn't been that long, but it has. I remember when I worked at Arthur Andersen back in the early 90s, it was rare to see women in accountancy. And here you are, Alannah, a director within Wayland. I'm personally so proud of you as your friend and also as a professional woman. What does it mean for you to be where you are now? And was it an easy or a hard road to become a director?
Thanks, Catherine. That means a lot to me. Really, I think I was quite blessed in my journey. The only thing I found really, really hard was the learning curve. So starting out as a graduate, learning the hands-on side of the craft, as well as then learning to be a leader and the challenges that come with that. They were the biggest things. I was so lucky to start out at a time where attitudes towards women in the profession, because let's face it, it was a male-dominated profession. So where attitudes to women and in the professional workforce in general were actually changing, and to work for people, for me, I worked for people, predominantly males, who genuinely gave everybody the same opportunities. So I'm very grateful for that, but I'm fully aware that others in the profession and the workforce in general haven't been so lucky.
Yeah, look, I totally agree. I mean, even when I was at Arthur Andersen, I was really, really lucky that I had a male boss, who was just fun to work with, but really supported having women, in accountancy and giving opportunities as well, empowering them. you know, look, there's so many factors that contribute to the disparity gap, you know, from occupational segregation, jobs held by women and paid less, bias, stereotyping, unpaid care work, and more. I mean, obviously, women predominantly have stayed at home looking after children and predominantly look after the aged care of our parents, simply because it's just something that, you know, is in our DNA. We naturally gravitate to do those jobs. The New Zealand Human Rights Act of 1993 paved the way to improve things, such as not making a recruitment decision based on prohibited ground of discrimination. However, 30 years on, the result of this 30 billion gender gap is just staggeringly disappointing. Christine, you know the struggle well of bias. Women in skirts just above the knees and loving fashion that displayed human character just simply couldn't be good leaders, right?
And wasn't that an absolutely disgusting example of the way people thought back then? And I do believe it's changed since then. I think it's sort of a myriad of complexity. And, you know, both of you are a lot younger than me, but I was one of the people who fought for women's rights in the workplace. In fact, for women's rights generally. And some of the things we fought for are now long forgotten. And I look at the behaviour of some people and I think, holy hell, you've got no idea where we've come from and what we had to do to establish that. You know, I fought back then for us not to be called girls. Now, the reason we fought for that was because we didn't want any man to be able to refer to us as some silly girl who couldn't do what they could do. We weren't girls, we were women, and we were very, very capable. Now, everyone calls everyone else, and so do I, because I've given up. You know, I just think, oh, well, it probably doesn't mean the same thing as it used to, but we didn't want to be seen as an object. We wanted to be seen as far more than that. And when I think what that fight was like, and listening to Alannah, it was men who empowered me. There was only one woman before you came along, Catherine. In my working life, certainly in the public sector, there was only one woman ever that paved the way for me. The rest of them were men, and they were enlightened men who would look at the capability of a woman rather than just give every opportunity to men. And we were very lucky to have those men back then. But, you know, part of it hasn't changed at all. And that's why I say it's so complex. Young women think they've automatically got that place we fought for, but that is not true.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And thank you so much for highlighting me, Christine. And, you know, it's certainly you and I share similar stories, or war stories, I should say, about what we have achieved. But we don't just lie down. We challenge the thinking. We get amongst it. And, you know, that made us unpopular at times, you know. For just going out there and speaking our minds, and you know, sometimes it's even challenging other women who, you know, look at us and go, you know, what are you doing? You're meant to be on our side. But it's not about taking sides. It really is about doing what's right or saying what's right. I guess for me, you know, the more women own their confidence and strengthen their capabilities, along with continuing to smash down that glass ceiling, the more we see the rise of female representation in the senior leadership position, it will empower naturally other women in business. Alannah, how do you own your own confidence as a woman business owner?
Look, I think it's really just about being true to yourself, being honest, being open, and just recognizing that, yeah, there are still lots of people out there that will try and cut you down, and it doesn't matter where they come from, who they are, what gender they are, what race they are. It comes from often a base of jealousy or being insecure in their own positions. And I just think you really just need to be true to yourself. That's the biggest thing that you could do, and have really good communication.
Absolutely, and build that really solid network of trusted people. Like Alannah and I were on a conversation this morning, and you know, we're able to talk to each other as we have done over those 3 decades, and just to be able to have those conversations and know that it's a safe ground is so important. So, Christine, coming back to the similar life stories that you and I could share, it's almost like, you know, we've come out of that same pea pod, and you know, it's quite scary that you and I have had similar stories of you know, adversity as well as success, you know, being pulled down and by the people that very much don't want us to succeed. So what advice would you give to professional women in valuing their worth to be leaders in business, sitting at the board table, or just being their own boss in business?
Well, you know, I was just talking actually to a man this morning who's a leader in business in Wellington, and he was telling me about the fact that they have been examining resilience and why kids today haven't got resilience. And I think you and I have got something to really thank our families for, because we were both exposed, I say from the time I took my first breath, to really, really big difficulties, and they've never stopped in my life. And I know that if people had gone through similar things, especially that 2 years where I was pursued every day in the most hideous way in New Zealand, a lot of people would have killed themselves. And I often talk to my children about why didn't that happen to me? It happened because I had resilience that was given to me because every day I had to deal with something. And they're now talking about the fact that children have wonderful lives. By and large, they're protected by their parents. Everyone's lovely to them. They go to school. They're never criticised. Everything's great. And when they hit the real world, the resilience is not there. And I think there's a lot of us still who have a lot of resilience because we've faced a lot, but we've got to get rid of the imposter syndrome. I still find so many women who find themselves doing something amazing and say, how did I get here? I'm not meant to do this. I'm not good enough to do it. Yes, you are. Yes, we all are. And it's not about men versus women. It's about if you've got the skill, we want that skill used because our country needs it. Our economy needs it. And we've got to believe in ourselves, but we've also got to be able to cope with the tough times. We can't, I was going to say cry, but that sounds like a very female thing to say. But you can't get upset every time something goes wrong. You've got to work it out and make your way through it. And you and I both know, Catherine, in the work we do at the Engine, that's part of the support we give. People come to us and they're very, very distressed because something will go wrong. You just work through that process and you have someone who stands beside you who encourages you.
Absolutely. And look, when Christine's talking about the crying, she and I both know that that's a natural thing you do. Like if we were to sit here and say none of us have cried, we're human just like you that are watching this. So, you know, I've been on the phone with Christine when something Alannah and adversity's happened for me, and it's brought me to tears because I care. And I'm not going to change who I am. But I also know that once I'm through that emotion, I've actually got to just get on with it because I can't let it keep dragging me down. And the adversity that we go through, and I used to say this all the time, is to look up at the sky and go, right, I'm done now. You can move on to that next person. I'm character built. I don't need any more resilience. But the reality is it will just keep coming. That's the thing called life, and we're in that thing called life, and there will always be something thrown at us. So it's really important that you do go through those emotions and you build that really good support network. Alannah, coming back to you, what advice would you give an aspiring female accountant in joining Walker Wayland Auckland?
Well, I think we've pretty much covered it already. Be yourself. Be open to learning and to new ideas. Don't be fixed in your mindset. Don't be afraid to ask questions and challenge the status quo and be challenged in return. Communication's a massive key to what we do. But at Walker Wayland, we've got an amazing team. There's 30 of us all together, and it's our open door policy. Everybody is very, very supportive. And so, you know, we welcome new faces, and anybody that wants to apply, if we've got an opening, come talk to me.
That's fantastic. Christine, maybe we jump ship. Maybe we go and start applying to be at Walker Wayland Auckland ourselves.
No, Alannah would sack me after a week because she realised that I could do numbers and an accountant able to do the numbers.
I'm sure you would be great.
Hey, look, just coming back to what you talked about, Christine, our upbringing has certainly shaped us to who we are. Look, I quite often talk to my clients about how I came from a single parent family of 8, 5 boys, 3 girls, and I always admired the strength of my mother. She worked 3 jobs to keep us fed, clothed, and housed. She's extremely progressive and driven and became a supervisor before she was asked to retire at 60. I used to say to her, "You're a woman before your time, Mum," because people used to look at my mum and they were jealous of her in the same way I saw them look at me when I was that young 20-year-old in the corporate world and I was getting jobs and they were jealous of me. Look, Alannah, you and I worked with Mum. She was really hard to work with at times, fun but hard to work with. She used to have a bit of an iron stick. But they were interesting and fun days, and obviously, having that good role model. Having said that, some of my siblings looked at me and challenged me on whether I could do this as a business owner, but, a woman in business, what have you got? How could you do this? And quite often I used to get in trouble all the time because Mum would say to them, "You're doing the dishes tonight because Catherine's studying and she's the only one that cares about education. So thank you, Mum. I know that you're up above watching this, but I really do appreciate not doing the dishes and studying." Why is it that we're always looking for faults in others instead of spiriting them on, Christine? Why do we do that to each other?
Unfortunately, I think it's a New Zealand thing. Look, I don't mean it doesn't happen in other places, but in New Zealand, it's alive and well. And, I talk about the heresy of the sisterhood. I think women are really mean to women. The younger generation is getting a lot better at looking after each other than we ever have been. But I do believe in the heresy of the sisterhood. Some women are mean girls and they're older women, and I strike it regularly and I don't get it. What I've done all my life, I'm so grateful for what was given to me. And, I wrote a book called Light the Flame because someone lit the flame in me. And I used to tell my 6,000 people that their responsibility was to light that flame in people who'd never had anyone take an interest in them before. But, my whole life is about helping other people to be the very best they can be. Anything I see that's good in someone, I'll tell them, and not just women, whether they look great on a particular day or I love a service I've got at the petrol station. I always acknowledge it because I think we've got to feed each other and not put each other down. And we women are bad at it. Very nice to someone's face, not very nice when they're not there. And it's time it ended in this country. It's that tall poppy syndrome just extended so much more to women.
Yeah, and look, when you talk about feeding positivity, it really is just so important to say something to someone and acknowledge them. And the actual, what comes from that is just so incredible. It's so uplifting,
Change someone's life with one comment. You can change their life.
Yeah, either one way or the other, the stuff that happens behind someone's back. I mean, I've been accused of a whole bunch of things, and then when it comes out, it actually never happened. It was never said, and someone says, "Oh, I made it up." But why would you even make it up? There's always a footprint that leads back to the trail. And, at the end of the day, it's really questioning the integrity and the quality of that person's character. So I know I can sit here and be so honest and so real and with a pure heart in everything that I do. And I know I can say that about you ladies as well, because that's what we do and that's why we work so well together. If I go back to when I was a young adult, which really wasn't that long ago, I know you said, Christine, we're a lot younger than you, but you don't need to stroke our lovely egos. But I started in finance, and I remember being passed over for roles, to other males. And this is not about female versus male. I'm just talking about 30-something years ago. And I ended up leaving the job, that job, and I went next door to a law firm, which I have to say that, back then was the longest 4 weeks of my life. And you'll go, why was it 4 weeks? Well, on week 4, as I walked past the finance company, my former boss was outside waiting and asked me to come back. Now, that former boss was a woman. And at the time, she said to me, Catherine, I'm not going to give you the promotion because you're emotionally immature. And I said to her, I have a heart. And when she said that to me, it was like, I'm in the wrong house. I need to leave. I need to move on. And, she waited outside 4 weeks later, and suddenly in 4 weeks, I had matured enough for her to say, come back. And the irony of the whole thing is I went back, I got nearly a $10,000 pay rise. And I even got added a new role, which I'm not sure was a good thing or a bad thing, but I was also promoted to sexual harassment officer. And, that was all at 22 years of age. I kept working hard, I kept getting promoted, except when I wanted to leave the firm to apply for other jobs, I was passed over for other jobs in other firms because I wasn't a bloke. And they'd always say that to me, we've given the job to someone else because they're a bloke, and they could get away with it back then. I was too young, and apparently I didn't have the experience that the males had, but it was all lies. And, they even said to me, I got the roles because I must have slept with people within the firm to be promoted.
Of course.
Wow. I was just like, wow. It just, I must have, it was just amazing. And,
You'd have to be pretty desperate for the job, truly.
to be a sexual harassment officer and to sleep my way to that job, I can tell you, it was certainly interesting. I actually started my new office in a cafe because I said to them, that's where my office is going to be from here on in. But, it was 30-something years ago, and I like to think it was very different now. Alannah, we've talked about this before, tall poppy syndrome. To make up lies and not celebrate the genuine success of another, it impacts many women when they want to progress, so why are they being challenged by their success?
It is an interesting one because I found in my experience, many women do actually undersell themselves in job interviews, and I don't fully know why that is, except that maybe it does have something to do with the fear of being that tall poppy. They really want or need to secure the role that they're going for, and they don't want to be the person that A is going to get cut down at the knees and B is going to be better than everybody else. So they undersell themselves a little bit, but it really doesn't help in times where employment is difficult and it doesn't make it easy to get a job when you need it. But I am finding now that many women, and we've talked about this too, that often the younger generation, they're realizing that they don't need to be part of that culture and that they do have a good chance of finding their ideal employer. So just being themselves in an interview, being prepared to give examples of the amazing things that they've done is probably the best thing that they can do to prepare themselves for an interview. Taking along that resilience with them and their full credentials and talking about it, I think in many industries they've got a better chance now of avoiding being that tall poppy, but it's definitely still out there.
Yeah, it's such a shame too, because the potential of these women, in that organisation is so great. Look, let's talk about having women on board. In leadership or business, it brings greater diversity, skills, experiences, views. When you actually have that diversity, on your board, it's proven that diversity means better governance. Last year, New Zealand Rugby was penalised and lost $280,000 from Sport New Zealand funding because of a lack of women on its board. Out of 65 major New Zealand sporting organisations, New Zealand Rugby was the only one not to reach the government mandated 40% women on board quota by December 2021. Sport New Zealand quoted the $280,000 in Sport New Zealand funding will be returned if the quota is met. However, financial penalties will increase to nearly $600,000 if New Zealand Rugby continues to be non-compliant. The New Zealand Rugby Board Chair, Stuart Mitchell, said at the time, the New Zealand Rugby Board acknowledges we've not met Sport New Zealand's requirement for 40% representation and the subsequent financial penalty. However, he said, while the funding is valuable to New Zealand Rugby, it will not impact our current work streams in the process or community game. Christine, what are your thoughts on quotas and what's happened there?
Well, it's almost as though they're saying, look, it's worth getting it's worth getting penalised. We don't care. And I don't know where they're coming from in that. If they really can't find the right woman for the role, then they shouldn't appoint them. I've got quite strong feelings about quotas and having people on there for the sake of having them, but I also understand that if we don't have a quota, there'll be many organisations that choose to do absolutely nothing at all to balance it up. So you're sort of between a rock and a hard place with that. But that was a very interesting response. And to me, it says, we don't care. We're not having, I don't know if we're not having any women, but we're not meeting the quota and we'll take the punishment. And that's just the way it is. So I can't imagine why they find themselves in that position, because there are a lot of women in New Zealand now who are very capable and very skilled and add something to a board. I find women very courageous. I think we've conditioned our men to be nice all the time. You know, don't get too stroppy, don't get too out there. And it's women who often bring up the things that need to be faced on a board. And that's certainly my experience of the last 20 years of being on boards. It's almost always the woman who'll fish out the issues that are in there and expose them. So yeah, I still think there's that fear there of having women on boards, and I don't quite get it.
Yeah, I don't quite get it either. I was kind of even wondering, well, like you know, maybe the woman didn't quite meet the criteria. And then I was thinking about us three, and I'm like, well, gosh, there's plenty of us out there that do meet the criteria. So, and then I kind of wondered, well, maybe there are people better for the job, because we've always talked about it's got to be the best person for the job, not necessarily around gender or race, but it didn't really add up for me. So, look, just also moving on, these, you know, top CEOs Antonia Watson and Matt Pritchard issued a stern warning on diversity and inclusion. The annual Champions for Change, Diversity, Equity and Inclusion report, which tracks members' progress year on year against several key DE and I measures, showed a 2% improvement from 2022, with women now accounting for 39% of board positions across companies who've joined Champions for Change. However, the mood of the boardroom is saying if diversity is not embraced with the inclusion of diversity, then businesses could end up being detached from the people they employ and the clients they sell to. Many big brands claim to embrace diversity, but they're lagging that 40% target. Why is diversity important, Alannah, from your perspective?
I think it depends on your definition of diversity. So to me, diversity is not about a person's ethnic origins, whether they're male or female or otherwise. Diversity is purely about people. Every person is different. Every person has different background. Every person has different skills and strengths. And that's what makes it important. If you don't have a good mix of these things in your business, then you're unlikely to move forward in rapidly changing times such as these. So, you know, how would you thrive? That's what diversity is more about to me.
Yeah, look, I totally agree with you. It's about having different thought processes at the table. And that's why we hire people as well. If we hire people just like ourselves, we'll end up with the same outcome. So it's really important that you bring different people, different personalities. Obviously, you want them to be aligned with your values and definitely passionate about where you're going. But it's so important that you have that multiple or multifaceted thought process amongst people. Christine, just a quick question. Is it time for mandatory 50-50 gender quotas on boards from your perspective?
I don't think so. I don't like quotas, as I've said to you. And look, I support diversity, but I am seeing people being put into roles because they are of a certain ethnic group or another reason when they're not ready, and that's also setting them up for disaster. So I don't like a percentage being put on it, but I did acknowledge before, how else do you do it? Boards need to be seen to be doing it without having to, and maybe it's more than 50%, Catherine. Maybe we'll see a lot more than that in the future, but the targets can be perverse. They can have perverse outcomes. So yeah, it worries me a bit.
Yeah, look, I totally agree with you. It worries me as well. Look, I want to go back to addressing gender pay gaps in leadership positions. It requires a multifaceted approach that involves changes in organisation, policies, cultural attitudes, and individual behaviours. While there is a no one-size-fits-all solution, there are some strategies that we three have come up with. Let's start with salary transparency. Christine, do you want to cover off this?
Yeah, I once again, if you did it in bands, I think that would probably be acceptable to people, but you can't share people's absolute salaries with anyone else. There's privacy in New Zealand, a lot of privacy laws. I wouldn't be happy with it, but I wouldn't mind it in a band. I think that, if you're showing how many people, male and female, you've got being paid in certain bands, I think that would be enough to scare most people into being fair and sensible.
Absolutely. Alannah, I agree. If we talk about, equal pay policies, is that a slogan or an action?
Oh, it definitely shouldn't just be a slogan. No way. It needs to be a reality in your business. Companies do need to implement transparent pay structures, eliminate any bias, and provide clear criteria for promotions and raises. We at Wayland, there's no disparity between males and females, if you want to look at it that way, or any other disparity. You are purely paid on your skill and your skill level.
And it's based around that job too and the requirements for it. So, it really comes down to right person, right competencies, right skills for that job, and just creating those pathways. Alannah, we're seeing equal parenting rights for both mums and dads, which is great to see. How does Walker Wayland encourage parental leave and support?
Yeah, we often find that, for example, if we've got a male in the firm whose partner is having a baby, they do want to have time off to support them, especially in those early days, and that is awesome. We really encourage that. But the reality is they also still need their salary. We're a relatively small business. We can't pay people for huge amounts of time off and no work, but we can provide the flexibility around the work environment and support them in being able to work when and where they can. So, when you do provide generous policies for both males and females, mothers and fathers, it does foster that culture that values the work-life balance for everybody.
Perfect. I guess for me, I've also always championed the implementation of fair and objective performance evaluation processes that focuses on that measurable achievement and skills, rather than relying on subjective criteria that may be influenced by bias, what we were talking about before. Right person, right job, right skill set, right competency. Christine, we always talk about it starts at the top. It's that top-down commitment. And you talk about leadership all the time. So what are your thoughts around that?
Well, look, leaders do set the tone. What do they say? The speed of the boss is the speed of the crew, which really means that whatever the leader sets as the values and the culture in an organisation is what happens. And so the leader has to take responsibility for diversity and for ensuring that there is fair pay and that it's balanced and equal. So you, as the leader and the executive team, really, if you're a bigger organisation, you set the way it's going to be, and you have a real responsibility to be absolutely fair. And that doesn't mean paying people the same amount. It means paying the individual what they are truly worth.
Absolutely. And Christine, how do you personally have those conversations with business owners, around that whole diversity, inclusion, transparency, all of what you're talking about, that top-down commitment and all of those aspects? How do you approach that conversation?
It is actually just a conversation. It's something that's vital. That's a conversation that's vital that we as advisors have with our clients. And I am really surprised that people who've been in business for a very, very long time haven't thought of some of these things. I found someone the other day who has never ever had performance agreements with their staff, and this is a long-standing successful business. It's worked without them, but what would they have achieved if they'd had them and they'd been really clear about what was required? So they're standard things, but this is an extension of that. And for me, it's a normal conversation to have with business owners. Sometimes they've never thought of it though, which surprises me.
Yeah, it's interesting when you did have that conversation with me in a general sense, and the perception of the company having done well, when in actual fact they said to you, oh, I wonder why people have been coming and going. Well, people are going to come and go if you're not going to give them feedback and develop them and do that whole performance review process. So, you know, we've kind of gone a bit over time, lady, but Alannah, I'm going to start with you. What are your top 3 values, or just top values for the benefit of having women in leadership at the board table or being in business?
I think perspective is one. It provides a different perspective, and you know, let's face it, men and women quite often do think and act differently, and it's great to have that balance, the yin and yang, if you like. Balance is the second thing, and the third is that, you know, women are very loyal. They're very keen to do a great job, and I'm not saying that men aren't either, but women often work quite to a tight time frame because we have to juggle. And I think, you know, that they are loyal and great to have on a board or in a leadership position.
Thanks, Alannah. And Christine, what about from your perspective? What's some 3 values or some values to have women at the table?
I completely agree with Alannah. All of those things, or her 3 things, are my 3 things. I completely and absolutely agree.
You can't copy her. You can't copy her.
Hannah, men and women are different. We do think differently. We do things differently. Women are naturally nurturing, and not all women. Some men are very nurturing, but you know what I mean? We are different. We try and pretend that we're all exactly the same, and we're not. We are conditioned differently. Our brains work differently. We need both to be really successful.
Absolutely. And, you know, there's a lot of male directors out there who can't even go home and talk to their wives about the situation at the office, and their wives are shareholders. So, you know, get someone to come in and help and get those conversations started. If you don't want people questioning your company as showing bias, then ensure you've got a diverse hiring panel for recruitment and promotion decisions. Alannah, what, you know, as being a female director in leading accounting firm Walker Wayland, what advice do you offer our female viewers about considering a career at Walker Wayland?
You better believe that we do have bias. We do have bias, but it is all around having the right skills, the right person, and the suitability for the role that's on offer. It's not around gender or anything else.
Thanks, Alannah. So look, for you that are watching this, there's no doubt proven benefit to have women in leadership, governance and business. When we work together and parity is on an equal par, the conversation focuses more on the opportunities and achievements as opposed to disadvantage. Although there certainly are challenges women in business face, there's plenty of positives to focus on too. And being a female leader in a sea of men, whilst we know it can have its challenges, I can guarantee you its rewards are priceless. Know your worth as a businesswoman. We've covered that off today. Know your worth, because you'll likely come across people who will underestimate you. Ignore it, take learnings from it, but don't dwell on it. Surround yourself with others who will inspire you, uplift you. Alannah said it right at the beginning. Believe in yourself. Overcome the fear of failure. It hasn't happened, so don't worry about it. I was humbled the other day to have a lovely message sent to me from a number of women in business, unsolicited, just the day, just email after email with a few email catch up from people. And one really struck a chord. And without reading the entire message, the person wrote, among many things, you know, sorry, start again, among many other tangible outcomes, I think most of all, Catherine, you helped me to believe in myself and in what I'm worth. So thank you. And that's what she wrote to me. And honestly, it brought tears to my eyes that I had made such a difference to somebody. Christine and Alannah and I are here to empower you through our experience as women in business and leadership. do reach out to us now for a conversation by contacting us through businessadvice@theengine.biz. My next session on LinkedIn will be discussing the common pitfalls to avoid when moving your business on. Ladies, it's been great to have you on today. I'm sorry it went over time, something that we're all passionate about, and I knew it would go a little bit over time, but thank you again for your pearls of wisdom. And you know, if anything, hopefully the listeners today have actually realised that they can do this and that they can come and speak with us and know that they've got people here that don't judge. So thank you, ladies. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.